Okay. All right, good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all virtually this morning. My name is Frances Klingenberger. I work with the Greater Bakersfield Chamber, and I'm happy to invite you all on behalf of the Chamber and Bakersfield Young Professionals to today's webinar. So our BYP Summit is typically a one-day event, but due to everything happening in 2020, we obviously can't all be gathered together, so we decided to expand the series, or the summit, into a series of events, all online, so we've been able to cover a wide range of topics. Some of our upcoming topics in the next few weeks include equity, diversity, and inclusion practices, leadership, entrepreneurship, and financial success. So we hope to keep seeing some of you in the next few weeks. I'm going to pass it over to my coworker, Hillary Haynes.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Hillary with the Chamber. So glad that you could join us on Monday morning for this session. I was personally super excited when Chief Martin agreed to speak on leadership, because he is a phenomenal speaker for those who haven't had the pleasure of hearing him speak before. I'd like to thank our sponsors for this event, and those are Strata Credit Union, Comprehensive Blood and Cancer Center, and Kearney's Business Technology Center for supporting this program so that we can bring you these free weekly webinars. Just to go over a little Zoom etiquette today, this session is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the Chamber's YouTube channel after, so that, you know, if you get distracted with the Zoom, another Zoom call or conference call, you can go back and listen to what was said. If you want to ask a question, we ask that you type it in the chat, or when Chief Martin asks, you know, do you guys have any questions, or is there anything that wasn't clear? Now's the time to go off mute and ask your question or ask follow-up questions. We definitely want this to be an interactive session. And then I'm going to turn it over to our BYP Council member, Kelsey Brackett, who will introduce our speaker.
Okay, thank you, Hillary. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kelsey Brackett. I work at the Bakersfield Police Department. So it is my honor and privilege this morning to introduce my former Chief of Police, my former boss, Chief Lyle Martin. Chief Martin was selected as the 20th Chief of Police for the Bakersfield Police Department in December of 2016. His experience includes serving as a street-level narcotics officer, motorcycle officer, homicide detective, Special Enforcement Unit Sergeant and Lieutenant, SWAT operator, and team leader. After working 32 years for the Bakersfield Police Department, Chief Martin retired in 2019 and was selected as the Chief Investigator for the Kern County District Attorney's Office. Chief Martin is a member of the Bakersfield Downtown Rotary, International Association of Chiefs of Police, the California Police Chiefs and Officers Association, the Kegley Institute of Ethics Community Associate at CSUB, and President of the Bakersfield Police Activities League. Chief Martin also enjoys reading and working out. Chief, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Kelsey. Want to make sure, Kelsey, give me a little head nod. Can you hear me? All right. Well, thank you all for having me. We're going to go through a little presentation here. And like they said, if you have questions, please ask. I want to make sure that I answer all of your questions. I'm very humbled that I was asked to participate in this. I will say that there was a little bit of false advertising right up front. It's the Bakersfield Young Professionals, but I see that Steve Sanders is here. So either someone has a different definition of the word young than I do, or I missed something in the translation. But morning, Steve. Because Steve is a good friend of mine.
Steve, I'm here for my daughter, so.
Yeah, all right. So we'll get started here. I'm going to try to share my screen. We did a little pre-run just to make sure that I have it. So, Bakersfield Young Professionals, and the topic here is leadership in crisis. And, you know, in this world of viral videos, they've put a lot of police chiefs and second in commands and basically the entire industry of law enforcement on their heels. You know, having the ability to navigate the new landscape is critical in maintaining public trust and organizational credibility. The word perception, it's used quite often. However, what do executives really know about perception, and how do they make decisions based upon it? Today, I'm going to speak to you about leadership during crisis, and I'm going to provide a few tools to reflect on. I'm going to ask you to assess the impact of your background, education, and experiences, or I like to call your B, on your professional competence, your values, your critical thinking, and your problem solving. Because I have a question. What is going on in our country right now? When I think about leadership in crisis and I ask myself that question, I come back to perception. Perception is reality. The origin of the scientific knowledge of perception is how we know what we know and our understanding of that. Now, what does that mean from a business perspective? What does that mean from an academic perspective? What does that mean from whatever industry that you're in? Well, before we can learn anything, perception has to take place. That means we either had to have seen it, gone through it, or at least had some type of exposure to it through our senses. And usually you can hear or see it, but subsequently you have to interpret. So what am I talking about? Letting the organization and the unit or the area of influence that you have know early on what your principles are critical when we're thinking of leadership during crisis. So how do we get there? Well, first we have to set the foundation. What is your foundation of who you are and what you believe in? As I went through the list of participants here, it's very impressive that we have everybody from the economic sector with banks, nonprofits, education, law enforcement, agriculture, and the list goes on and on. So we all bring different foundations to the table. When you get inside your organization and we start down this path of leadership, what does that look like? But let me pause, because leadership is not about a position. Leadership is not about a title. Everyone in the organization is a leader, and they are influencing the decisions that happen either in the organization, on campus, or wherever you are. And we need to accept that, and we have to accept that responsibility. So I have a question for you. Are you who you say you are? Many times people get into positions, and I've heard the phrase, fake it till you make it. They get into positions and they start to decide, okay, where am I going because I want that next big promotion? I need that next big sale. I want people to think of me as X, Y, or Z. But what are those three things or three principles that your actions lead to much better decision making? Well, for me, these are the three: your values, your morals, and your ethics. Because these things will come into question when decisions are made under crisis. Why is he or she making this decision? And people will come in with different reasons why you are making the decisions that you're making. So we have to have clear communication. And that communication has to coincide with our desired objectives. So if the core and enabling communications are in line with the mission of the organization and assist with worker satisfaction, the effects can be positive, extremely positive. However, if not, the effects may be terminal. Successful organizations learn to adapt. Environmental changes are needed. And the structural complexity of an organization is no longer identified as a static entity, but a fluid living entity changing with environmental conditions to survive. What do your morals, ethics, and values say about you? What do people think the first time they hear your name? What do people who know you think when they hear your name spoken? All of these things play into your background education experience and your ability to lead or move an organization forward. So we have to have some self-awareness. And the first thing we have to understand is our emotional triggers. The unwillingness to acknowledge your emotional triggers and your inability to recognize them when they are influencing your decision-making will adversely affect your leadership exponentially in a crisis. If you make emotional decisions on a daily basis, how much more amplified are those decisions when you're under stress? I've oftentimes had to take a deep breath and go, okay, why am I thinking what I'm thinking, and why am I making the decision that I'm making? Is this an intellectual decision, or is this an emotional decision? What are your triggers? We all have them, which can be detrimental to your leadership context. And those who are in your circle of influence, they know what those triggers are. So you also have to be aware when going forward or taking in new information from those who you surround yourself with. Are they acting off of your emotional triggers? Anxiety, depression, guilt, shame, or anger. When you think about a time where you were either on campus, in the office, or even at home, where you had one of these feelings based on a decision that you made, but you don't understand how you got there. Now, from a leadership perspective, there's one thing that is absolutely critical to help you navigate your emotional triggers. And that is surround yourself with people who will not hesitate to tell you when they feel you are going off track. And that can be tough to do depending upon the agency, organization, or industry in which you work, because that may be a subordinate. And you have to create an environment where people have no problem walking up and tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, can I talk to you for a second? Now, when I was asked to speak, I was also asked, to give 3 books that I would suggest in regards to leadership in crisis, and things that are my go-tos. Well, one of those books is one of the, I think one of the greatest leaders, but definitely one of the best coaches to ever walk the planet. And that was John Wooden. But leadership in crisis, as it says, it starts long before the crisis happens. There's that nasty question again. Are you who you say you are? Do people know what they can expect from you? I was always amazed when I was the chief at Bakersfield PD that my staff would come in, we would have something that we were going to go forward with, but they had to get either my buy-in or my signature or me to say, okay, to give them the go-ahead. And most of the time, the conversation started like this. I'm 99% sure what you're going to say or the direction you're going to give me, but, and they would run it down to me. So based off of my mentors and people who I looked up to and those who helped train, mold, and guide me, that let me know that I was doing the right thing. People knew what to expect. They knew what was expected of them. So when they're coming in going, I'm 99% sure of what you're going to say or what direction you're going to be in, that means you're on track. And this is going to be critical when we get to those decision-making points in the crisis. Now, John Wooden won 10 National Collegiate Athletic Association titles in a 12-year period. He was the head coach of UCLA Bruins, including a record 7 in a row. His philosophy, it was a simple one. He believed that many coaches overcomplicate things. His view with basketball is a simple game. So why make it complicated? He said, I think the coach's job is to prepare players to play and then let them do it. Failure to prepare is preparing to fail. So back to my 99% sure of what you're going to say. Coach Wooden had a player, Bill Walton. Now, Bill Walton went on to be an NBA player, a Hall of Famer, great guy, but he was playing for Coach Wooden. And Bill Walton was mostly well known not for his play, but for his knees. Because this is back in the days before now, you know, you go get a knee surgery and you're in and out of that place in like 4 hours and you're up and walking within like 5 hours. It's incredible where we've come. But back then, if you had a knee surgery, you were out for months. And Walton had problems with his knees. So one day after practice, Bill Walton walks into Coach Wooden's office and he says, Coach, you know I'm having problems with my knees and they really hurt. And the coach said, okay. He goes, I hear that marijuana does really well for pain in my knees. What do you think? And Coach Wooden looked at him and said, well, Bill, I don't know the science and I haven't heard that marijuana is good for pain in your knees, but I do know that it's illegal. Now, when Walton shared that story, he said that it was crystal clear what the coach was telling. When you're giving direction and you're talking to people, is it crystal clear what you're saying? Now, for me, when we're talking about this, and it's long before the crisis happened, I say hire the best hearts and minds that you can find. Find people who believe in service. Then train them, give them clear direction, and get out of the way. People want to be challenged, and they want to be productive. Now, Coach Wooden made practice both challenging and productive, which he said led to better results. I believe that. You have to practice before the crisis happens. If we're challenging the people who work around us, we're challenging ourselves when things are slow, when we're challenging and doing the things that we need to do, when the crisis comes, we will be better prepared for it. When I was leading the SWAT team, historically, we had always gone through training, and training was kind of like, yes, we're going to shoot. Yes, we're going to do tactics. We're going to do these things. And we played this game of yes, you did, no, you didn't. Now, you would think there was a bunch of 10-year-olds out there. No, these are 25 to 45-year-old men and women who all type A personalities, and no one likes to lose. So we'd do exercises, and someone would say, hey, you weren't concealed the way you're supposed to, not the way you've been trained. Yes, I was. I saw you. No, you didn't. So I bought these things called simunitions. And simunitions fire a little plastic thing that hurts when you get hit. Now, the first couple times we used simunitions, the people weren't real happy because they were going home with welts. They were getting hit, but it took away that whole, I saw you, no, you didn't. That welt on your elbow says, I saw you. But we have to work towards failure, because you don't know what you're capable of until you fail. And that was the point of the exercise. I make it a point to try to anticipate the needs of the organizations in my sphere of influence in an effort to have several options or suggestions available prior to being asked a question or having to take action. What does that mean? It means that the learning never stops. In leadership, you have to be out front. You have to look at other things. And purposely, when I looked at your list of participants, you have to look at other industries. What's working well at Era Energy that we can put to work at the Kern County Superintendent of Schools, and vice versa. Let's not get put in a box where you don't really, because you only know your industry or what you know. Any questions so far? I'm gonna pause. No questions. Am I talking to myself? Is this working? Somebody tell me something. Somebody say, good morning, Chief.
Morning, Chief.
All right.
Morning.
Morning, Chief.
Morning, Chief.
All right, just want to make sure.
Feel free to come off of mute too if you have a question.
So where are we going? We have to start with the little things. This has been on the wall of any office that I've ever had or on my desk. This saying. Why do I put that there? Well, when we talk about leadership, we have to talk about relationships, which leads us to have to talk about friendship. And again, this will become clearer in about 5 minutes when I get to another point. Minor infractions in our minimum standard. If you ever find yourself in a leadership position and something is brought to you, you know, Jane did X, X, Y, and Z, and you find yourself saying, that's just stop right there. Because generally we'll say, well, that's just Jane, but I expect higher and better things out of you. No. If this is it, if that's the standard, that's the standard. Now think about the previous slide where I talked about challenging people and productivity. The minimum standard is for everyone. So we need to continue to challenge and to have people be productive. So are you okay with your friend or teammate taking shortcuts? How many of you in your position today are okay with friends or teammates taking shortcuts? Because here's what I can tell you from a little bit of experience. In March, things shut down. The world changed. And we trusted, maybe even in your organization, we trusted people to work from home. We made accommodations. We did things. We changed scheduling. So in July, I did a workload study. Anybody want to guess what the workload study looked like? Well, it was across the board. We had people who were producing twice as much as they were when they were in the office. And we had people who were producing half as much as they were when they were in the office. But the one thing I found really interesting was people who were like me, extroverts. I have to have that interaction. I'm a people person, so this is killing me. We're less productive when we sent them to work remotely because they didn't have that energy. So if we're not okay with a friend or teammate taking a shortcut, how about somebody we can't stand? Do they become our accepted minimum standard? Do we report that? Do we call them out? Why? Because an organization that values its privileges more than its principles will soon lose both. It's been my experience, true friendships will survive conflict. as a leader, you have to be willing to call people out. And you have to call them out when it doesn't mean anything. Because again, when we get to that crisis, when you need everyone on their A game, that cannot be the first time you call someone out, because they may shut down, they may walk off. Many things can happen, and most of them are not very positive. So, subordinates versus colleagues. In Lencioni's book, in the section, he calls it exhibition. And he talks about this fear of conflict. And he tackles the issue of colleagues and equals, because this is where things get bogged down, specifically in crisis. Generally, we have no problem calling out our subordinates. Most of the time, we're very hesitant to say anything about our bosses. But our biggest fear, our biggest hesitation, our biggest stickiest situation comes from when we have to confront our equals or colleagues. Why? Somebody tell me something. Why? Why we have issues with people who are equals or colleagues? Why is that so tough? We got a bunch of leaders on here. Come on, somebody.
Rejection, fear of rejection.
Fear of rejection, yes. That is one.
Feeling like you're nagging them.
Feeling like you're nagging them. Anybody else?
They're going to be upset with you, so it's going to be uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable, yes. Uncomfortable, that's one of my favorites. Growth is uncomfortable. Anybody's ever had kids, or if you remember when you were growing up, they called them growing pains. And it was actually a physical reaction. You had growing pains. That is a real thing. And when you're growing your mind, your skills and abilities, there's some pain that comes along with it. Any other reasons why we're hesitant at that
Vulnerability.
level? Vulnerability. True leaders have to be willing to make themselves vulnerable. And we'll talk about that here in a minute as well. So in Lencioni's book, it says, we are equals, so who am I to tell you what to do or how to do it? If we will not do it when the waters are calm and steady, how likely are we to do it when we're in crisis? I've been hesitant to say anything to you for 2 years, and now we find ourselves in crisis. How likely am I to say anything? Now, leadership in crisis also requires that you have made deposits into what I like to call the buy-in bank long before it happens.
Mm-hmm.
You have to demonstrate that you will put the needs of others ahead of any petty wants of desires of your own. So what am I saying? People should not hesitate, or more importantly, they should not question your motives in a time of crisis. And that is best done ahead of time. So I asked you earlier, what's the first thing that people in your organization think when they hear you or not? Do they think kiss butt, only worried about herself, wants to make it to the top? What's the first thing that they think? And what have you done to create that immediate thought? Now, those of you that are in leadership positions, and I know we have some students on here, so you may be leading the debate team, you may be leading the band, you may be leading the football team, all those types of things. One of my friends and mentors, Jim Bell, Used to be in the radio business. Jim and I were having lunch one day because I always try to pick the brains of people who run organizations. We were talking about a myriad of things, and Jim gave me the 4-second test. And here's Jim's philosophy on the 4-second test. He says, if you want to know what anybody in your organization truly thinks about you, find a way to have an unscheduled, unexpected run-in with them when they are with their significant other. He says, and you only get 4 seconds. You'll miss it if you're not completely aware and focused. He goes, and have them introduce you. He goes, their significant others, first reaction to you, look at their face, look at their body language, everything. Hi, hey, so-and-so, this is Chief Martin. And at the first thing that they roll their eyes, their body slumps back, something happens, they get upset, that's what that person really thinks about, because they're taking that home. Or if their first impression is, oh my gosh, so glad to meet you, Jim talks about you all the time. Those types of things. So if you want to figure out where you are on that scale, figure out a way to get that first 4 seconds. I thought that was interesting. I've had mixed reactions with that. But it does make me think about that employee when their significant other has a negative response to me, for me to go, okay, I need to up my game with this person. What has happened in the past with this person that has caused this reaction? So, where are we? Jim Bell's 4-second test. We have an incredible need for leadership in crisis, and how do we deal with it with what we call now the cancel culture. In the book, The Leader Within, there's a summary of basic response modes. And they include fight versus flight, accept versus control, extroverts versus introverts, direct versus indirect, perceive versus judge. I like that one. Perceive versus judge. Risk-taking versus risk assessment, optimism versus pessimism. When we're thinking about these things, there is a need for future leaders to understand and commit to the 5 P's of ethical leadership and power at all times. However, it is irreplaceable during crisis. It's not easy. And do you have the stomach for it? When you have a moment, I want you to Google something similar to police protest or police officers on the line during protests, and look at some of the things that they're being subjected to. There are people 2 inches from their face screaming at them, the top of their lungs, calling them ungodly names, and they just stand there. Because this officer is standing there based on the actions of an officer they didn't even know, 1,000 miles away. But now you are the focus of this thing. And do you have the stomach for it? Think about your organization. There are going to be those moments where it's fight or flight, accept or control, risk-taking versus risk assessment. And do you have the stomach for it? Because when the crisis happens, they cannot question your knowledge, skills, and abilities or your motives. So the takeaway for this slide is the relationship to leadership in crisis is what we tend to work in what I call mixed patterns of response. And that can cause us to become indecisive. For example, there's a tendency to act both for results and in response to people. And we have to be honest with ourselves. Getting results does not always make those around us very happy, right? Ever been told it's not what you did, it's how you did it? Now, when time is of the essence, quite frankly, I don't have time to address your feelings. Therefore, we must look inside, know what our tendencies are, and surround ourselves with other competent leaders who are not like us. I'll say that again, not like us. Surround yourself with people who tell you what you need to hear, not what they think you want to hear. What are those 5 P's I was referring to? Purpose, pride, patience, persistence, and perspective. Purpose, making and understanding your why, has to be crystal clear. The reason for which something is done or created, for which something exists. That's the purpose. When leading in crisis, okay, this is going on. Oh my God, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Boom. The purpose has to be crystal clear as to what decisions you're making. People will follow. They will do what they need to do if they know what the purpose is. Pride, that confidence and self-respect expressed by the members of the group and of yourself. Patience, keeping the goal in mind. Do you have the capacity to accept or tolerate delays, trouble, or suffering without getting angry, upset, or losing sight of the objective? I'm going to tell you, I struggle right here. Patience, I have to tell myself, take a breath, because I'm a results-oriented leader. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Persistence, firm continuance in the course of action, in spite of difficulties or of opposition. And perspective, a particular attitude towards the way regarding something or a point of view. Remember, I always say, we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. And when you're the leader, if you haven't surrounded yourself with those people who are not like you, you're going to miss something. And it's not going to be good. Not good for you, not good for the organization, not good for the decisions that you make. Keep that perspective in mind. Leadership and the Pygmalion Effect. I like to talk about this. In the simplest terms, the Pygmalion Effect represents a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, foretelling of the leader's potential and performance brought about by the leader's expectations. Anybody, where's your power derived? Within your organization, where's the power derived from? The president, the CEO, the superintendent? Where? Where do you get your power from? Hello?
People.
From the people, yes. I like that. Who said that? This thing didn't pop up. Your name didn't pop up.
Oh.
From the power is derived from the people, yes. What is the Pygmalion Effect? Now I went through the academic part of it. What is it? Self-fulfilling prophecy. What's that mean? Anybody? Well, I'll give you an example from me. I go golfing, but I don't golf. Okay, let's get that straight right now. An example for me is anytime I have to hit a golf shot over the water. If it's off the tee box, I change to a cheaper golf ball. Or if I'm in the middle of the fairway, my stomach starts to hurt. And I start thinking of every golf lesson I've ever taken. and every show I've ever seen, and my stomach hurts. I mean, really, because I expect to hit it where? What's my expectation?
Hit it in the water.
Yep, I'm going to hit it in the water. And 9 times out of 10, where does it go?
In the water.
In the water. And then I'm upset. I can't believe that happened. What the heck am I doing? There's another great book out there. It's called The Inner Game of Tennis. Suggest you pick it up. I should actually read it again because it's exactly that way. The expectation is there. This Pygmalion effect, the expectation is there. If my power is derived from the people, I must have them believe that I believe in their ability to be successful. We're going to get through this crisis, whatever the crisis is. We are going to be okay. People have to believe in the leader. And that is everything that you do. From the way you park your car when you pull into the parking lot, to your body language when you walk down the hallway, to your office, to the way you pick up your phone or start to type on your keyboard. It is critical that power is derived from the people and they are taking their lead from you. Perspective, and how do we gain it then with this leadership Pygmalion effect? Well, we invest in others. We experience setbacks, then we learn from those and move forward. Regardless if the crisis is in a few minutes, hours, days, weeks, or years. I'm going to ask you to remove your political cap for a second. And please think about this. Do you think that the major automakers around the world see themselves in a crisis with the announcement Governor Newsom made last week regarding all new car sales in California and zero emissions beginning in 2035?
No, no.
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 Why not?
He'll be out of office before that time. Plus, they've got a big enough monopoly or group that can lobby against it.
Correct. Now, 15 years sounds like a long time away to most of us. But if you are on the line staff of the new V8 engine that you've been working on for 10 years, that you knew you were going to sell a huge amount of them in the Central Valley because of our farming industry, what you're feeling. You're not the CEO. You're the guy or gal on the line. Do you have a different perspective on whether or not that's a big deal?
Absolutely.
So as the leader of the organization, we have a crisis, do we not? I would say we have a crisis.
Yeah.
Your resources, your people, now we already had COVID, where the last year or so, sales have been down in manufacturing. So now, okay, we're gonna look towards the future, and I'm a power engine mechanic. And what just happened? The state with the most cars they said what? So from a leadership perspective, even though they quote unquote know the things that you guys talked about when I first asked the question, that doesn't always trickle down to the folks who are doing the work. And it has to be done the right way. So now what? Moving forward in the face of uncertainty and ridicule. One of my mentors, Dr. Larry Ryder, says there's no right way to do the wrong thing. Uncertainty will always be there. But in a crisis, if you are doing the right thing for the right reasons, using ethical power, you will fail forward. Now, Dr. Ryder's a smart man. And he talked about using this ethical power and doing the right thing for the right reasons. And then I threw in my own little, you will fail forward. You give him a man credit. I'll say that again. You will fail forward. In crisis, fear of failure and ridicule cannot be an anchor around your neck. What are people going to say about me? What are they going to think? Well, when the facts come out and the thing happens, I made these decisions based on the information I had at the time to make the best possible decision for X, the organization, my community, my campus, whatever it is. My current boss, the District Attorney Cindy Zimmer, she says, we are here to find the truth, no matter what the truth is, and bring justice to the victims of crime in Kern County. Now, she doesn't get bogged down in the ambient noise. She takes this complex issue and she makes it pretty simple. So the how, he's going, man, you've talked a lot. How do I do this? Well, 4 things. I make it a point to hire the best people with the best hearts, train them to the best of their ability, and do what? Anybody remember? There's gonna be a test later. Get out of their way. Ask them truthfully for evaluation and suggestions. Then evaluate that information and make a decision. Prior to implementing, ask one last question of the people you trust. Right here. What am I missing? People have to be comfortable with, hey, that's great, Lyle, but we need to take into account this, this, and this. Oh, thank you. And be genuine about it. Own up to it. We talked about vulnerability when we're talking about talking to our equals. Be vulnerable. In crisis, it's about the crisis, and it's about everybody else. It can't be about you. Invest in people, believe in people, do this collectively. Invest early. Get that buy-in now. So when the crisis happens, they don't question your motives. They just go. They're on autopilot. That's how we lead in crisis. Now, there's one exception to the rule. And that exception is this. When the torpedo has been launched and it's coming towards the ship, I don't have time to call a conference call or a committee meeting to ask which way to turn. Sometimes you just have to suck it up, make a decision, and live with your decision. Own it. And if it was the wrong decision, come back afterwards and say, this is what happened. This is why I made the decision I made when I got it wrong. Don't give them time to point out that you got it wrong. You come out and say, I got it wrong, and we will do better next time. But if the torpedo's been launched, it's already there. Then what? So using my Governor Newsom example, if he'd have said by 2022, the torpedo's been launched. 2035, again, that perspective. We don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. We see it from our perspective. How does this affect me? And if we can do those things, we will all be better for it. Any questions? I try to keep this PowerPoint brief. DBP, as I call it, death by PowerPoint.
Don't be shy. Ask questions.
Questions, discussion. Come on. Nobody?
I don't really have any questions, Chief.
But my compliments on an awesome presentation. Like, I just agree with pretty much everything you said. So it's refreshing to hear.
I appreciate that, Jeremy.
I'd like to second that, Chief. Thank you very much.
No, thank you guys. This is going to be a team effort. We are in uncharted territory in our city, our county, our state, our country, and we need leaders like you to help us navigate that. And where are we going to be in a month, 3 months, a year, 5 years? All right, looks like I'm going to actually make my lunch workout.
Going once. No more questions? Any questions? No? All right, Chief. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your morning to share your knowledge of leadership. I jotted down a couple pages of notes, so thank you. And I know that I'll be purchasing some of those books that you mentioned as well. Another thank you to our sponsors for supporting this BYP Summit Series, Strata Credit Union, CVCC, and Carney's. And then also for those who attended today, you'll be entered to win. You'll get to choose. We have 2 winners, so you'll get to choose one of the 3 books that Chief Martin suggested, and we'll be drawing those winners and announcing that on our social media later today. So stay tuned for that. Francis?
Thanks, Hillary. Thank you so much, Chief. This was a great webinar today. I also have a few pages of notes, so Hillary and I are going to have to meet after this to talk about it. We hope that you all enjoyed today's webinar as much as we did, and that you'll join us again next week for our next webinar with Strata Credit Union. It will be next Wednesday, October 7th at 10 a.m. for another hour-long webinar, and Credit Union Month. So we're going to be working with Delmy Escobar. She's Strata's lending supervisor, to talk about credit. What is credit? Why is it important? What do we need to know about it? And she'll also be giving us some tips and tricks on how to improve our credit as well. So I believe Hillary is sending out that link in the chat right now. You can use it to register, and we hope to see you all again next week.
Thank you so much
for being here.